Welcome to the smoothjazz.com No Messin session. That's what we call it. I'm Sandy Shore, where we get straight to the point of the matter and the heart of the matter. Basically, in an informal setting, we have these very productive but casual conversation with industry friends and colleagues to cover a lot of different angles inside this business of music. So hopefully we'll turn a few lights on for you today, and we have access to a very powerful brain trust if you think about the artists and friends that we know in this industry. And I think these conversations are extremely constructive, regardless of what kind of music you might be making. We just so happen to be sitting on a vista of contemporary jazz for the most part. My guests for this session have been invited to shed some light and impart some wisdom with us today, from mastering to mixing to marketing, even. Joining me, two musical powerhouses. I'm excited to chat with Grammy-nominated and winning composers, musicians, and producers. From the world-famous Yellow Jackets, bassist Jimmy Haslip is here. And we've also got from wonderful, amazing jazz fusion keyboardist from Jeff Lorber Fusion. Jeff Lorber joins us. Hi, gentlemen.
Hi.
Hi.
So great to have you on the No Messin session.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. And, you know, we're really kind of here to talk about fusion today, if you think, and I know you guys know a bit about fusing, because really music production from A to Z, recording, mastering, marketing, even, it's a fusion of several arts, isn't it?
That it is, yeah. And Jeff and I, you know, I know we spent a good amount of time thinking about graphics and things like that too. So, you know, it's a visual part of it. So
yeah, and honestly, Jimmy, that's what gave me the idea. Jeff's got a new album coming out. We just had a wonderful interview, which is going to air this coming weekend, actually, on smoothjazz.com. But Jeff mentioned to me your attention to detail with the graphics and the visuals. And then that's when I started thinking, we've got to get together, the three of us, and kind of put our heads together for artists who are seeking out not just excellence in their production, but in everything. I mean, and that's what we do at smoothjazz.com. We help the artist develop once they've created that song and get it seen. But that visual, even today with just a JPEG, it means so much, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really does. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We spend a lot of time, you know, thinking about even photographs, anything that visually will create some kind of curiosity or attract attention.
Well, also we're working with Shawnee, and they definitely have their point of view about what what works for them. You know, as you probably know, almost every one of their covers, for the you know, like 90% plus, is the artist, is a picture of the artist, and that's what that's sort of what they like. And they're not big fans of like black and white. They're not big fans of artwork necessarily, although they do have some of that. I think, like at some point, like at this point, I've been working with them for long enough that I think there's a level of trust where they kind of, and we kind of do our own thing when it comes to artwork. We don't use their, I don't know who they use, but we have our own people that we kind of do it ourselves. We deliver the artwork to them. You know, they have input, of course, to a degree. Yeah. You know, it's the point we show them a rough of what we're working on, and they have to say they like it, because that wouldn't be good if they didn't. But so, you know, that's part of the mix too. I mean, besides wanting to have excellent artwork that represents the spirit of the music that you're putting out, and that relates to the title. I mean, the title of the project is really important, obviously, and it has to relate to that. You know, you want to have like a sort of all-encompassing vision of where the title, the artwork, and the music all work together. They're all on the same page. You know, because if you have one of them that's like real left field and the other two are in a different direction, you know, like you have real mellow music, and then you have a really crazy, you know, artwork, you know, that wouldn't be smart. Just like in an arrangement of a song, if you had like some horn lines that were really didn't fit the rest of the arrangement, you wouldn't want that either. So yeah, so that's kind of how we approach it, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very cohesive project if you think about it. You have to be you have to connect. I mean, it's not just, I mean, that's kind of our vibe here at smoothjazz.com, where 20 years ago, we felt we were going to take radio and make it a visual because of the internet. And that excited me as somebody who, I mean, I feel like I am a multimedia kind of artist in a way, that way. And I know both of you are as musicians, you also have visual visions. You know, you see your music in a way. And
Yes.
back in the day when we were all listening to records and we had those albums in our hands, I mean, how many hours did we spend on the floor on the weekends, seriously, or late at night, and we just couldn't get enough. It's like we were reading something that wasn't there in these pictures, right, from those albums. So
Right.
today we're reduced. I know that some people do come out with physical copies, and I think there will be a calling for that for a little while longer. But mostly we're reduced to a JPEG now.
Right.
That's going to come over on Spotify, on Apple Music, on smoothjazz.com. When you're tuned into the app, you're going to see it. And to me, I think that still matters so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about, like Jeff said, it's about connecting all the dots. And then, of course, I mean, really important, the music. And
exactly.
Fortunately, we have a fantastic composer here, Jeff Lorber. So he's writing up a storm and sends me music all the time, and I listen to it. Everything is really fantastic and has a connection with each other. There's a whole concept on this record in particular where, we were just thinking of some quantum physics type things. And Jeff, of course, being a big fan of that concept, he came up with space time. And that seemed to make a lot of sense under the circumstances that we've been in quarantine for 16 months. So there was maybe too much space and too much time went by, but
I just wanted to put one thing. So slightly off topic, but not really, which is, we've both been doing this a long time. We both made records with major labels, and we were both around when contemporary jazz was like really super popular and going, a lot of those records were going gold. And we've watched everything. The world constantly changes in a lot of different ways. But one thing that really made me want to be more involved and focus more on artwork, since we were just talking about artwork, is, I made 6 albums for Clive Davis and Arista Records in the 80s. Mostly in the 80s. And when you have a cover that ends up going wrong, that you're not really happy with, which I've had a couple of those, unfortunately, but once you have that experience, then all of a sudden once you experience that, you really want to pay more attention to the artwork and make sure it's done right, because
it never goes away.
Yeah.
No.
And sometimes at a big label like that, I mean, it's great that we actually have kind of control over what's going on, because at a big label, like back in those days, they had an art director. And I remember, like, when I was at Arista, they had just hired a guy that I think his previous job was working at a big magazine, like, Harper's Bazaar or something like that. He was used to dealing with models and big shoots and big sets and stuff. So I made an album for Arista that was called Step by Step, and I went into the studio, and I don't know how much money they spent on this step. They put all these steps, and they had wardrobe, they had makeup, and they had all this stuff. And I mean, the cover was okay, I guess, but it was sort of a weird situation to just walk into that and have no
input.
No input, zero.
Wow.
I really didn't know what I was getting into.
Wow.
And,
yeah.
and anyway, so
we want to have input.
Well, and isn't that the best part of this independent world we're living in now? Even with, as you're with Shawnee, it's an independent label and those
Yeah,
guys are accessible to you, you know?
yeah.
We have kind of a moniker for you guys over here because we know you've been contributing to a lot of contemporary jazz artists over the recent years. And so, you know how the producers have their names. So we call you guys Jazzy Jeff and Jimmy Jams. And
Oh, we'll have to use that. That's good.
That's that's
but
pretty
you
awesome.
but you do. I mean, so let's walk us through what it's so somebody comes to you, you like the tune, you know, or it's one of Jeff's tunes, like you just said, Jimmy.
Well, a lot
You
of times I work with artists where I send them a track and they write the melody. I mean, that happens
okay,
often.
okay.
We collaborate in some, or sometimes they send me something and I'll contribute to it in some way. I mean, it could work in any kind of, all kinds of different ways.
Okay, I get it. So then once you receive, maybe you receive a song, maybe this artist is feeling rather prolific and they send you something and you both like it. So what happens there if they decide to work with you or you know, even if they're doing their own thing, what happens next once the song is fleshed
Wow.
out a bit? What
Yeah,
comes?
and once it's flushed out, yeah, and hopefully, you know, we gain trust of the artist. I mean, it's important to, you know, be inclusive and listen to what they're thinking, you know, and then it's like, okay, how can I inject my thoughts into this person's vision of what they want? And with that, there's a very symbiotic connection and collaboration. Um, so I know Jeff and I, we produce a lot of things on our own and together, and I think on all levels we keep that in mind. Unless, I mean, there's all sorts of situations. There might be an artist that just doesn't have a vision
Mm,
and doesn't know really what to do. I've worked with some people like that where they say I have 30 songs, but I don't know that they all fit together. You know, I don't know what to do. So I
yeah.
say, well, send me the 30 songs and then I'll listen to all 30 and maybe I'll pick 8 that I
Hmm.
think fit together and have some sort of a statement. And then I'll show that to the artist and they go, hey, I like that. Or I don't like that. But most of the time I've been successful and they say, I like that. And I go, great. So we have a foundation for a concept. We have 8 songs. If they wanted to do more songs, lately I've just been kind of going with 8 songs, 9 songs. You know,
Yeah,
people's attention spans are very short these days.
that's
And
true.
you don't want to overload a listener. You want to give them a big bang for the buck and then move on. And then, as they say, leave them wanting more, you know?
That's a great point. And then also the way these streaming platforms are working today, oftentimes singles float into different
Right.
playlists.
Very
So
often.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So
yeah. Jeff's always checking out Spotify and, you know, what's the show? There's
Well, there's New Music
New
Friday every
Music
Friday.
Friday.
yeah, I love that too, Jeff.
It's like 200 songs, 198 of them. You don't really have. I don't have a lot of use for it often, but you know,
But you
sometimes
find stuff.
I always find stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you meet an artist, you know, it's a long journey of being a musician to be where we're at. Some people are just like taking the very first steps. Other
Mhm.
people, you know, you have to kind of analyze your artists as they come in and see where they're at. You know, some people might be great players, but they don't have a good compositional approach, or somebody might be the opposite of that. You just have to kind of analyze what they give you, and first of all, you got to see if there's enough there to work with.
I
Like
see.
there's
Right.
quite often, you know, somebody wants to work with you and they're not ready yet. You know, you just got to tell them like, hey, keep at it. There's some good stuff there, but there's just not enough there to really make something. You know, we'd be both wasting our time if
Hmm.
we spent our time and money trying to make music.
Not enough
Um,
meat on the bones.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll interject just one quick thought. Then there's an artist who is a very good musician, but as Jeff's saying, they don't have any music. So then you try to help them maybe do some covers. I don't know, that sometimes that works.
Right.
Or get them together with other writers to write music.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to do some educating. You know, you got to kind of educate them about the whole process if they haven't gone through it before.
I just worked with an
Exactly, yeah.
artist, and I called Jeff and said, "You got any songs?" Because they didn't have a lot of songs. They had like 2 or maybe 3 songs, which is not enough for a record or a CD or a whole project. So Jeff right away sends me a big pile of songs, and they were all great. I played them for the artist. He flipped out. We recorded 8 of Jeff's songs on this record. And then, of course, then my job was to try not to make them all sound like Jeff,
Exactly.
to make them sound more like this guy, you know.
Yeah.
So
there's a real art in that. There's a real art in that. I mean, you guys
yeah,
have to seriously analyze, you know, who you're working with.
Yeah.
And what are they about? And we've also come to determine that sometimes, and you know, including myself, you know, this is not to pinpoint artists, but we don't always know what we don't know, right?
right.
And then that's where you would come in. And I think what the coolest thing is Jeff, as you said, you guys have been around a while. You've have an amazing investment into this business, artistically, and you know, in all levels. For you to be available just to certain people and to be out there, it's fabulous, because it's also affecting us as radio programmers over here. We get to have killer, you know, songs in the mix from different folks besides Jeff Lorber Fusion and Yellow Jackets, you know. So it's great. We're really grateful to have you guys in the mix. And this conversation is really about how important these steps are. You know, we can't forget the composition is key. We know that. But what about afterwards, you know, where you take it to the mixing? And this is a question I want to ask. Is mixing the same as mastering?
No, it's 2 different things. And mixing is to, you know, get the best possible sound quality and also balance. You have to balance everything so that you can hear everything, the drums, the bass, the guitars, the keyboards, horns, so that when you're listening to it, it sounds like, you know, basically like a record. So that's the mixing process, which Jeff is a fabulous mixer. So he's humble about it.
For sure.
I do my best.
I think he's a great mixer, but he's so detail oriented on that level that he's also tapped into hiring a bona fide mixing engineer. And there's an art to that. Not every engineer is a good mixing engineer. I've even learned that by trial by fire.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Some guys are good at just putting like recording live drums and live bands, and but they're not necessarily great at mixing.
No,
mixing is like a special thing. But the other thing about mixing is like you have to give the mixer, like if you want a great record, a mixer can't take like anything at all and make a great record out of it. You have to give them, like, for example, I was just thinking like Steely Dan, you know, their records are just so amazing. Like if you just took the instruments that they recorded and you just put them all up and listen to them without like really mixing them at all, it would probably sound really good, because every element of the arrangement, like the way the drums are recorded and played, the bass, the keyboard parts, the vocals, they're all like amazing. They're like an incredible, you know, they fit together so perfectly, you know, where the frequencies of the bass and the drums and the vocals, they all have their place and they don't really interfere with each other. You know, that's what mixing is about. So the secret to great mixing is really to have a great song and to have a great arrangement. And then it makes it easy to have a great mix. If you go into mixing where you have like a bunch of instruments that are kind of colliding with each other
or not recorded
and
well.
a track, or there's buzzes and stuff, of course you have to deal with that. But you know, sometimes the mix tries to, what they call you know, you get to the point where you got to salvage something, like it actually sounds bad, and the guy that's mixing it has to try to make it sound okay, you know, and then he's doing as good of a job as he can. But that's what a lot of people don't understand is to make, you can't fix it in the mix. That's what they say. Some people say, oh, we'll fix it in the mix. A lot of times you can't fix it in the mix. You have to mix,
unless you take it out of the mix.
When you record your first instrument.
And we do have technology today that we can, on some level, fix it in the mix, because there's things called triggers. Like if a drum set is recorded very poorly and just sonically has an awful sound, but hopefully the performance was good, then you can use these things called triggers.
You can replace each drum.
You can replace all the
Oh,
drums.
wow.
But use their performance. And
wow.
then you've taken the drum quality, the quality of the sound, and you've raised the bar like 20% and made it better.
So their kit is just out. It's literally out,
and
it's
we try to avoid that, by the way.
Okay. That's not something.
It's not fun.
Okay, that's a trick of the trade.
Work. It's called trench work. You know.
Trench warfare.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then there's things like tuning. There's all these tuning apps and software that you can use to get things in tune if something's out of tune, which will also make a mix not sound good if everything's out of tune. So but you know, hopefully we don't have those types of issues when we get music recorded, but occasionally there's things like that, and we can fix that.
I mean, one thing that I've been using a lot lately for whatever reason is you know, we have the technology to speed things up and slow things down. With, you know, and not change the quality of the sound and not change the tuning. It doesn't change the pitch. Like back in the day, they used to have something called VSO on tape machines where you could speed things down and speed it up or slow it down, but it would affect the pitch.
Yeah.
So you couldn't really do it very much, or else it would sound really weird. It would sound like chipmunks, or it would sound like something else. That's how they did those Chipmunks records, you know, the Alvin the Chipmunks
really.
But I've been noticing, just like sometimes I'll be working on something and I'll start something and then I'll come in the next day and it's like, oh wow, this might sound really good if it was just slowed down a little bit or if it was sped up a little bit. And you can test that. You can just take a rough mix of whatever it is you're working on, and then you can listen to it a little slower. And then if you like it better, then you can take every individual track and you can slow each one down, and you can slow down the whole arrangement.
That's very
cool. And continue working from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you might decide that the mood needs to be a slower tempo, right? Everything just completely changes. But it reminds me of remember the Techniques turntables? Couldn't you?
Right.
You could affect the pitch, I guess, on it, and it would sort of
it was thing. You can speed them up or slow it down, but it does affect the pitch. Although some of the new digital turntables will do that without affecting the pitch.
Wow,
that's amazing.
It uses the software.
We've come a long way.
We have.
You know what the big takeaway for me today is when Jeff, you brought up Steely Dan. I'm thinking that when an artist gets to a level where they're ready to reach out to you guys, you know, it would be nice if they, you know, I'm not saying everybody's going to have this vision, but the vision that Donald Fagen and Walter Becker had when they created and they crafted those songs that are timeless, I really don't think they're ever going to wear out. I think they're always going to fit. I don't care if it's 30, 21, they're going to fit. But if an artist could have a cohesive concept and bring stuff to you in a way that was sort of set up in the right color palette, if you will, it sounds like that's when you guys have the most fun.
Oh yeah.
Well, the more they can bring, the more,
the
more they have to offer, like in terms of if they're a great musician, a great singer, great player, great writer, and if they have they have a definite idea of the style of what they want to do, and they understand about dynamics and arrangement, and you know, the more of that stuff that they bring, the easier our job is. Then, I mean, if they have everything like that, then all we have to do is maybe just hang out with them and make a few minor comments here and there.
That's what I'm thinking.
And then, or you know, compared to when something requires like more
rewrites and
Yeah.
tuning and all the other things we just
A
talked
more,
about.
a more intense
Exactly, yeah.
educational approach of
And
what's
that-
going on.
Would that the advice then you might give to artists who are coming up would be to really try to settle into their craft, to, you know, maybe practice more, play more. I mean, you guys are still playing every day, aren't you? At this point, even?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't stop, right?
No.
Yeah.
Well, if it does stop, then if you actually find yourself having to play somewhere and then you realize, oh,
Wow.
I'm not playing so good anymore. This is not good, you know, so you don't want to find yourself in that situation.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
so you really have to practice every day, I find.
Yeah, you gotta
I
play.
mean, if I just take off like 2 days, that's like, and then I'll sit down and it's like, what happened? Where'd it go?
And that's
That's
more
amazing.
of a physical aspect of playing. You know, you have to have stamina and strength to play
Mhm.
keyboard or bass, or especially drums.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a real physical instrument. But you know, trumpet, you know, this embouchure, you got to practice every day, or else that goes
Yeah.
away, and then you can't play. You know, so
That's it.
everything requires some activity, you know, practice, just like an athlete. You know,
It is athleticism for sure. Yeah,
yeah, on a certain level, yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think
that,
one thing about what Jimmy and I, you know, our careers, we both started out when everybody was recording to tape. And the thing about tape is, like, on a reel of tape, like when I first started out, my first 3 records were made on 16-track tape. And
Those were the days.
and my thoughts at
the
that time were
days.
like, well, who needs 16 tracks? I only have like 4 guys in the band. We don't need 16 tracks. And actually, a lot of my early records only use like 8 to 12 tracks. That's all
Wow.
we use. Like nowadays, a typical session that we do, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like 60, 70 tracks, something like that, maybe.
Well, the Beatles only had 3 or 4 tracks.
Well, they only had
Exactly.
4. They had 4.
Exactly.
They had a 4-track machine, but they would play 4 tracks and they would bounce it down. They'd have the whole band up, like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. They put the whole like band on one track on a second machine, and then they'd have the sound effects of the clapping would be another, and then they had the French horn on another track, and then the lead guitar from George Harrison was on the 4th track, I think.
But that's so inspiring.
It is inspiring. You had to get very creative back then.
Oh yeah.
Hey, whatever they were doing, they did it the right way, because it sure is great music and it sounds fantastic.
Music that's gonna last for a long time.
Exactly. And they came to the table kind of prepared too, you know. That's
did.
why it
But
didn't matter if it was 4 tracks.
But you know, the thing is, Brian, what was his manager's name?
Epstein.
Yeah, Brian Epstein. So these guys were just a local band playing locally in England and playing a lot of cover songs. And Brian really wanted to get them a deal, and they were turned down by every label in London. You know, Decca. They were turned down by EMI, which turned out to be where they ended up eventually. But you can actually go online and you can hear the demos that they did for these other labels that turned them down. And to be honest with you, they don't necessarily sound that great. It was that process of continuing to play and continuing to do those demos and get more experience in the studio. And then eventually when they finally met George Martin and they got an audition with him, and he really liked where they were coming from. And he actually liked their attitude and their vibe more than their music at that point.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't necessarily super impressed with the music yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, so it doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It takes time, and it takes develop. You know, you have to give yourself time to develop and learn, I guess.
And talk about a collaboration between a producer and a band. You know, George Martin and the Beatles. That's quite a collaboration.
That was
By the way,
perfect storm.
my desk here. Can you see this?
Oh yeah.
Look at that.
So I bought this from George Martin. In fact, this used to be at his studio.
In London.
In London at Oxford.
That's amazing.
So I just thought I'd mention that since.
No, that's pretty fantastic. I'm glad you showed us that, because we've kind of just been looking at the ceiling for
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
And of
right.
course you
Oh,
two,
wow.
and of
Yeah,
course you two very attractive gentlemen.
well, I appreciate that.
So well,
Yeah.
we're so glad to connect with you guys. Any more words of wisdom you want to impart before we wrap this no messing session today?
Well, you know, I'm working with a bunch of artists right now, and a lot of different things, and everyone is still really interested in making music and bringing music to the world. And I implore all people listening that are potential artists, please continue your quest and your vision. We need music. Music, I think, is one of the more important things that we have in this world that will help with healing, with uh, getting people together, with bringing joy to people, and even dealing with sadness and dealing with tragedy. Music gets you through all that. So we need music, and I'm always trying to inspire young musicians and artists to follow their heart and try to bring more music to the world.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. And you two guys are people that I am honored to be spending time with today.
No,
We tremendously value your efforts, your contributions musically and production wise. We do work with a lot of your clients over here at smoothjazz.com. After they come through your studio, they end up coming to us, and we distribute them and deliver them to the world to wonderful reactions. So it's a very symbiotic relationship we all have here. And I'm glad we could make this work today. And I'd love to do something again. Let's maybe do a chapter 2 on this when you guys
sure.
have a little time.
anytime.
I'd
Love
like to
it.
just add one thing, which is something that I think is pretty obvious that everybody probably knows, but more than ever, there's so many resources online for people that are interested in record production, in recording, in harmony. I've found some really cool videos all just about these crazy people that love to study harmony and reharmonize song, and whatever you're interested in. I mean, the whole history of music is on YouTube, where you can hear like early performances of Miles Davis and people like that. So we didn't have that when we were coming
No.
up. We
No.
had
At 45s.
Yeah,
we had to go to the record store and try to maybe slow the things down and figure out what they were doing.
It's
But
amazing now. Yeah.
yeah, but especially also recording. There's this magazine out of England called Sound on Sound. That's probably the best music magazine, and they're online too. And so there's so many resources and so much information available that for people that are interested in music, whatever it is they want to know, it's to some degree they can find a lot of help just by looking
Absolutely.
for it. So
And
it's a good time
guys,
for that.
the playing field's really been leveled as well, given the fact that there's not as many gatekeepers. This is something we set out to do 20 years ago, is we felt there were too many gatekeepers in our industry. Now look at what's happened in 2 decades. I mean, you can get on Spotify, some playlisters can end up, and there's an art to playlisting as well,
Of
so
course.
especially the people you see with the highest listeners, those guys are very savvy guys and gals, very savvy in creating their playlists. Songs can float on up there, and next thing you know, you have millions of followers, and that's all without broadcasting in the traditional sense.
That's
So
right.
anything these days, when we first signed on, we used to say new jazz, no rules, and man, it's really true.
See,
It's really
see,
true now.
that's really a good saying. No rules, because there really are not rules in
Mm-mm.
music. Anything can go. That doesn't mean everything's going to sound great, but
That's true.
a lot of the most interesting music is made when people just decide to break rules or do something different, or
That's right.
go outside the box. And that's one thing that makes it so much fun to make music, is you can always try something new, and you can surprise yourself with what happens in the studio.
Definitely. And I love this world where we could hear a Yellow Jacket song in the same mix as maybe The Weekend, and it's out there. There are
Yes.
playlists out there with that kind of stuff. You know, same with Jeff Lorber Fusion. I mean, this really is a world where we are fusing genres and ideas and notions. And you're right, not everything is going to stick to the wall, but what does is inspiring. And it can come from a kid, or it could come from somebody 75 years old who's just for the first time in their life able to record because they were a doctor or a lawyer for the last 50 years, you know?
Right.
Pretty interesting times.
It's an open door.
Open door for sure. So we've just got had a wonderful session here with Jimmy Haslip and Jeff Lorber, or as we like to call them, Jazzy Jeff and Jimmy Jams. Guys, thanks so much. Continued
All right.
success to you both. Congratulations
Thank
on the new
you.
album coming out.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll see you soon, okay?
Okay.
All right. For smoothjazz.com
Okay.
Global, I'm Sandy Shore. Thanks so much.
Okay.